So the legend, the lore, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Were there ever aliens in Area 51, as you understand it,
So I've interviewed hundreds of people
that worked there?
in the net, well, not just at Area 51, but in all the different national security and military intelligence and intelligence programs. And I personally have no reason to believe that aliens have ever visited Earth. That's just me personally.
Visited Earth, period.
I have no information that causes me to conclude that's the case. Now, with that said, many of the primary players in this present day, you know, there are aliens among us narrative, are in my phenomena book.
Mm.
I continue to communicate with a lot of these people. I'm talking about astrophysicists who fundamentally believe that there are aliens among us, right? So we beg to differ on that issue.
But for you, in terms of doing research on government agencies that do top secret military work, I mean, they would know, right? So you have interviewed a lot of people that have, at every layer of the onion, you don't have you don't see evidence or a reason to believe that there was ever aliens or UFOs captured from out of this world.
That is correct. And even perhaps more important, and perhaps this colors my thinking, but I am uniquely familiar with disinformation programs
Mm.
put forth by the CIA or the agency, as it's called by insiders, right? And I've learned firsthand about these programs, or rather learned from firsthand participants in strategic deception campaigns that the CIA has engaged in, beginning with Area 51. You know, the idea that all these reports of this U-2 spy plane, this giant long-winged aircraft flying 70,000 feet up. People didn't think airplanes could fly that high. And it's, the sun shining off of it. It looked like a UFO, and all the reports coming in. And the CIA opened up a UFO disinformation campaign office headed by a guy named Toto Odorenko, specifically for this reason. Now, does that mean that every UFO sighting in the world has been a U-2? No. But I come from that lane of thinking. And there are so many strategic deception campaigns. And as I look over the decades of how these same UFO stories, and again, this is just my opinion based on my reporting, this narrative that keeps reoccurring, it seems to me like a very large catch-all to keep the public's attention on that, not on that.
So, so to you, like sexy stories like UFOs are going to be leveraged by the CIA for strategic deception.
100%. I mean, Google Paul Benowitz. I'm always amazed that Paul Benowitz's story is not more widely spoken of. And I think that's because there's like the sort of ufologists or the people who are like absolutely convinced that aliens are among us. And I use that term loosely, but you know what I mean.
Mm.
And then there's the quote unquote skeptics, and the skeptics tend to be sort of like self-righteous. And I would never want to be self-righteous. So I'm not a skeptic. I'm just, agnostic, I suppose. But Google Paul Benowitz, and you can learn the story of that man who thought he saw a UFO in the 70s, early 80s. And the Air Force, because the Air Force intelligence community works hand in glove with CIA a lot, and some of the other intelligence agencies. Of course, there's 17, not just the CIA. And they destroyed Paul Benowitz. They sent him to a mental institution by pulling a massive strategic deception campaign against him because they didn't want him to know about the technology that he was seeing at Kirkland Air Force Base. So look that up, and then you go, oh my God. And, to my eye, you can apply any of these other names, substitute in Paul Benowitz or any of the current individuals, who really become convinced of X, Y, or Z when in fact there's a strategic deception campaign going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of incentive for the CIA and other intelligence agencies to get you to look the other way. on whatever is happening. Plus, from a enemy perspective, whenever two nations are at war, to try to create hysteria in the other.
But then you have the Thomas theorem that becomes applicable there too.
Mhm.
If men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences, right? So this idea of like UFOs and we're being lied to, it becomes real to many people. And then that creates a whole subset of problems to the point where things are spiraling out of control and there is no center anymore, right? So a lot of people that are briefed on programs maybe aren't even aware of their position within a greater campaign. Or I'm wrong and there are aliens among us.
Right. So, I appreciate the possibility of acknowledging that you might be wrong. Uh, from everything you know about the U.S. government, if there was an alien spacecraft, like, what do you think would happen? Would they be able to hold on to those secrets for, decades? Like, would they want to hold on to those secrets? Like, what would they do? What's your sense?
I can't imagine that kind of exciting situation not becoming public information,
Mhm.
right? And the counter to that is this, right? This is a very strong argument for why this is a big strategic deception campaign,
Mhm.
right? Think about the Defense Department and think about how jealously they guard its airspace, right? I mean, you had a Chinese balloon flying over and the whole world went crazy, right? It was front page news. So the fact that the one element or a couple people in the Defense Department have made this statement, we've lost control of our airspace over this UFO, alleged UFO craft that they can't explain. I don't buy that at all.
But
Zero.
of course, it's possible that, it is alien spacecraft, if it is that, and they operate under a very different set of technological capabilities in
Mhm.
theory.
In my interviews with Jacques Vallée, who is the kind of grandfather of all ufology, and
Mhm.
he's such an interesting person and has such a really unique origin story about how he came into all of this. And he's such a scientist, right? And he is profoundly dedicated to this issue and stands completely on the opposite end of the spectrum from me and knows a lot more and has studied this for decades more. But what he said to me is the most interesting thing, which is that it's not a military problem, it's an intelligence problem. Because Jacques believes that this is some kind of intelligence, right? Which really, the closest I can do to wrapping my head around that takes me to consciousness, right? The idea of what is consciousness. And I think that's where it becomes very interesting. I think the government is hiding bodies and crafts is very Paul Benowitz. Read it. Google it, look
Yeah.
into it, right?
Yeah. I think this kind of flying saucer thing is a trivialization of what kind of, if there's alien civilizations out there.
Trivialization. That's a great word. Trivialization. I agree with you.
I tend to believe that there's like a very large number of alien civilizations out there, and I believe we would have trouble comprehending what that even looks like
Hmm.
were they to visit. I tend to believe they are already here or have visited,
Mm-hmm.
and we're too dumb to understand what that even means.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly would not appear as um, as flying objects that defy gravity for brief moments of time on low resolution video. I tend to have humility about all this kind of stuff. But I think radical humility is required to even like open your eyes to what an alien intelligence would actually
Mm-hmm.
look like. And to me, it's beyond military applications. It's like the basic human question of like, what is even this thing? Like you mentioned, consciousness that's going
Mm-hmm.
on. Like, where's this come from?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so powerful? Is it unique in the universe? I tend to believe not. Of course, I hang out a bunch with other folks like Elon who believe we are alone. But I think that belief, just like you said, has power because it actually manifests itself in reality. So if you believe that we're alone in this universe, that's a great motivator to build rockets and become multiplanetary and save ourselves, especially in the case of nuclear war. Because otherwise, whatever this special sauce, this flame of consciousness, will go out if we destroy ourselves on this earth. And for people like Elon, it's too high of a probability that we destroy ourselves on earth, not to try to become multiplanetary.